Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Plink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today, we're getting a few more questions for atheists from Christians. This time around, these questions come from a channel called The Jesus Renaissance and a guy named Eddie Williams. Eddie has a few questions for us atheists today.
Hey, what's up? Eddie Williams here. Hey, atheism is something that's been on my mind lately. And, if you live in a big city, it's quite common. There's lots of people that don't know God, that are seeking God, that maybe haven't heard of God. And so I want to arm you with a few things to talk to them about, because I think a lot of the times when we get in conversations with atheists or agnostics, Christians are on the defensive.
Arming Christians? I thought you wanted to ask atheists some questions. But from the look of it, you aren't aiming these at atheists in order to better understand their point of view, but you're giving these questions to fellow Christians as a sort of rhetorical weapon to bring to bear against atheists. And that is a bad place to be starting from. That sends the message that you aren't interested in where atheists are coming from, but you're just looking for gotcha questions that you can use to steer them towards Christianity. And if that is indeed your motivation at engaging with atheists at all, then seriously, dude, screw you. Atheists aren't waiting around like some damsel tied to the track waiting for big, strong Christian guy to come set us free from our atheism. And if you just have the right questions, it'll be exactly what we need to hear to break us of our bonds of non-belief. If you're going to ask us questions, then the goal should be honest discourse and greater understanding. If you're just looking for different tactics to help you proselytize, then go away and leave us alone. And another thing, you assume that atheists, as you put it, don't know God. Well, a good portion of us do in fact know God. We got to know God fairly well through lengthy periods of time within the Christian faith or other faiths as well. And it was exactly our knowing God that made us want to get as far away from that faith as we possibly could.
But oftentimes, atheists in particular have lots of questions that remain unanswered themselves. And so what I want to arm you to do today is to begin to ask them questions and begin to get them to think and ponder over their own thought process.
So yeah, it's like I said before. You think that us poor, misguided atheists don't know our own minds, don't know our own thought processes. And you good and much more intelligent Christians need to ask us the right questions to make us realize just how foolish we're being.
Oh wow, thank you so much!
Look, there may be and likely are some atheists out there who just weren't raised with religion and managed to go their entire lives with never being confronted with the idea of religion and never really thought that much about it. But trust me, they are few and far between. The vast majority of atheists, whether they're atheists from birth or deconverted, have thought long and hard about the idea of God. Long and hard.
That's what she said.
And after what was, for many of us, a long and difficult process of deconversion, we found our way out of religion and out of the general belief in God. And we know how to get back to it if we should ever decide that we want to go back to it. But in general, we are much, much happier in our non-belief than we ever were within the faith. So, you looking for more rhetorical weapons to arm yourself and other Christians with, to use against us to coax us back into the faith, well, that's offensive for a number of reasons. It's offensive that you don't seem to actually care what we think on the matter. You just assume that we haven't thought about these things. It's offensive that you are less interested in how we might respond than you are in planning a strategy to convert us. And it's offensive that your main motivation is conversion in the first place rather than just understanding us for the pure sake of understanding us.
Number one, where does objective morality come from, or does it exist at all? Many people that are atheists, they're probably pretty good people, right? They pay their bills on time, they obey the law, they use their turn signal, they do all of the things, they check all of the boxes that would say, yes, I'm a good person. I would ask them, why do they do what they do? Why do they obey these laws? If we're just all cells that have evolved over millions and millions of years, then what's the point? What's the purpose? Is there purpose at all?
All right, Eddie likes to run his sentences and questions together into one long, unbroken stream of conscious utterance. It's tough to try to find a stopping point in his diatribe to insert a response. Okay, so, is there objective morality? No. Morality is an interpretation. It's a value judgment of something's goodness or badness, worth or importance. In order for that to happen, in order to classify something as morally good or morally bad, morally right or morally wrong, it requires a thinking agent to assess and classify it as such. Morality requires a being, a subject, to interpret it. As such, it is subjective. Each individual has their own unique moral compass or code. And when you get into the very specifics of each person's morality, you find that there are at least some disagreements with virtually everyone else. We tend to agree on the big issues, murder, theft, assault, and the like, but even in them, there isn't uniform agreement across all people and all times, as any look into the differences in moral interpretations from culture to culture would quickly make apparent. There is massive and continual disagreement on every aspect of morality, despite many theist claims that everyone basically agrees on the major moral issues, and that it's only tiny disagreements that we have. It isn't. Now, as to the idea of why an atheist would follow laws or rules to begin with, or have any moral interpretation at all without it being imposed by a god, and that God's interpretation of morality being called objective morality? Just because there isn't an imposed morality by a God doesn't mean that there aren't actions that can be objectively viewed as harmful to the well-being of others or to society in general. Humans are a social species. We don't tend to do very well on our own. And since we are so social, we've developed a complex social fabric to aid us in our interactions with others. We do better as a society when everyone takes part in the maintenance of that social fabric. Lying, cheating, stealing, killing, or doing any number of things that are against the law or are considered unethical or generally considered immoral result in harm to others and in turn harm to the community and the social cohesion that we require to function as a society. If everyone ran around lying, cheating, killing, then society collapses overnight and we all end up in a Walking Dead-style dystopia just without the zombies. But more than just the bigger picture, societal impact reason to act in moral ways, there is a more fundamental and individual reason atheists can still be moral. It's called empathy. I don't refrain from lying, cheating, stealing, killing, or assaulting other people because I think a God has told me not to. I don't do those things because I don't want to do those things. I have empathy for others and don't want to be the cause of suffering in others that I wouldn't want for myself. Frankly, that seems to me to be a much stronger reason to act morally than divine mandate. Even if there were a God and he had decreed that I should treat others with kindness and respect, it wouldn't matter. I wouldn't be doing those things because God told me to. I'd be doing those things because I care enough about other people to not want to do them harm. So you tell me, who is ultimately more moral? The person who is kind because they were told by an authority whom they fear disobeying? Or the person who is kind because they genuinely want to be kind?
Question number 2, how do we get energy out of non-energy? This is an important one. We hear scientists talk a lot about the Big Bang and how the Big Bang kind of started forth in motion everything in the universe. But where did this original matter come from? Where did this original energy come from to be able to build up and then shoot across the universe? Where does this come from?
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
This is going to be one of those things that we are going to have to keep saying again and again and again, over and over and over, ad nauseum, ad infinitum, forever and ever. Because Christians just don't seem to get it. The Big Bang was not the formation of the universe out of nothing. It was the expansion of the initial state of high density and temperature. So there already was a massive amount of energy when the Big Bang occurred. Because that's all temperature is really. It's energy. And what kind of temperatures are we talking about? Well, scientists have deduced the temperature at the Planck time. The Planck time is 10 million trillion trillion trillionths of a second after the Big Bang began. At that instant, the temperature was 100 million trillion trillion kelvins, or about 180 million trillion trillion degrees Fahrenheit. That is a lot of freaking energy. Now, that term, the Planck time, that is as far back as we can currently look into the past. So, if you want to ask where all that temperature and energy came from prior to the Planck time, the honest answer is that we don't know. But it is possible, and likely even, that it has always existed. And if you would then go to, well, how could it have always existed? That doesn't make sense. It has to have had a cause. Well, you believe that your God always existed without a cause. How is that possible? Because that's just how it is. Well, that's just how it is for the universe itself. The difference is, we have evidence for the likelihood of an infinite universe that existed already at the time of the Big Bang. You don't have anything to back up your infinite, uncaused God.
The third question I'd ask is, where does transcendent emotion come from? Now, this is a more of a subjective question, but think about ideas like love and hate and joy. Where do these emotions come from? Do they play some sort of social utility? Is that the reason why we have love and why we have hate and why we have joy?
Emotions. All human emotions come from the brain. There are no such thing as transcendent emotions. There are no metaphysical or ethereal emotions that defy scientific explanation. The entire range of human emotions are things that are being produced by your brain. Specifically, the limbic system is a group of interconnected structures, like the hypothalamus and the hippocampus, that are responsible for behavioral and emotional responses.
Yes, user.
Alligators are aggressive because of an enlarged medulla oblongata. It's the sector of the brain which controls aggressive behavior.
That is correct. The medulla oblongata.
But Mama
The
said...
medulla oblongata is where anger, jealousy, and aggression come from.
Now, the medulla oblongata isn't specifically responsible for all anger and aggression, even though Colonel Sanders would have you believe otherwise there. That's more from the amygdala. But the medulla oblongata is a part of it because it controls things like heart rate, blood pressure, and other physiological responses that coincide with anger or rage.
Mama say that happiness is from magic rays of sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
Now, love comes from a combination of your ventral tegmental area, your hypothalamus, and your nucleus accumbens. So we see that word again, hypothalamus. It does a lot of different things, and it's located deep down, square in the middle of your brain. In addition to regulating several of your body functions like sleep and eating, it also produces and releases hormones. Hormones are a major factor in emotional responses. Some of the very things that you would likely view as transcendent emotions are more often the result of hormonal releases. Like, for instance, deep and intense love. Like, say, the kind of love a mother has for her child. Well, that is largely or entirely the result of the release of oxytocin, which is sometimes referred to as the love hormone. Whenever you see or interact with someone that you love, oxytocin is released by your hypothalamus. and it results in a self-perpetuating love bond. Whenever you are then re-exposed to that person or thing that you've fallen in love with, more oxytocin is released. Now, you may not want to accept that because you believe that emotions are too powerful, too important to simply be the result of hormones released and a purely physiological process in the brain. But sorry, that's what it is. That's how it works. Your feeling that there is more to emotions than brain processes, that there's something transcendent about them, is just that. It's your feeling. It has no basis in fact or reason. We are our brains. Everything we think, feel, or experience comes by way of our brains. That includes all of our emotions.
And oftentimes the answer you'll get is, well, it's social utility. See, if I didn't love my spouse, then I couldn't pass off my genetic offspring, and so on and so forth. But I'd ask, why do we love other things? Why do we love people that have passed away? And there's no social utility in loving someone who's dead. What's the social utility in really loving pizza or loving ballet? What's the social utility in that?
It may have been because of evolution that we developed our emotional attachments to things as it aided in our social cohesion, or because of its social utility, as you call it. But the process by which we form emotional attachments to people doesn't end when they die. The oxytocin that was released when you were around your loved ones when they were alive continues to release when you think about them after their death. The memory of that love that you felt for them when they were alive continues, and the emotional reaction that they caused in you also continues past their deaths. Though the process by which we develop and experience emotions may have come about because of its social utility, and thus natural selection selected for that trait, how those emotions work is just how they work. They don't work because of their social utility any more than a car's engine works because you need to travel somewhere. The why of something was developed does not affect the how of how it works. We form emotional attachments in our brains. Those attachments don't just disappear when the thing we fall in love with goes away. If it did, we'd fall out of love with our spouse whenever they went into the other room and we couldn't see them anymore. Then we'd have to go through the process of falling in love with them all over again. Where would be the social utility in that? And as for loving pizza, well,
I mean, it's delicious.
If we are just stardust and we are just cells and chemical reactions bumping into one another, evolving over the millions and millions of years, then there has to be some sort of answer from the atheist perspective of why we do these things. And if maybe there is no answer, then I would submit to the atheist and say, well, there's no reason for you to love anything.
There is no answer in the atheist perspective? Of course there are answers as to emotions. I mean, obviously I just laid out a bunch of them, but even prior to this, you think the atheistic view is that there's no reason for emotions at all? What do you think neurologists, psychologists, evolutionary biologists, or behaviorists have been doing for all of these years? There are many different fields of study that all lend themselves to delving into the complex tapestry of why and how the human brain works and how it allows us to think what we think, and more important to your question, feel what we feel. And they're doing it all from a science perspective, not a theistic one. Neurologists who study the hypothalamus or the limbic system didn't just find these areas of the brain and go, well, these lumps must not do anything at all because we know that emotions come from God, so these parts of the brain can't have anything to do with them, certainly. There are reasons why we feel emotions, and we've basically figured them all out. It's neurochemistry. God has been pushed out of this particular gap, Eddie. Find another one to shove him into.
Lastly, and I get a little more personal with this question, if there is no God, does your life have meaning? I just posed that. Does your life have meaning? So is there things you're passionate about? Are there loves like art or science, things that you really, really care about? Are there acts of charity or passion projects that you're involved with? And if so, why? Why do you support the homeless efforts in your city? Why do you care about the refugee crisis? Why do you recycle? Why do you care if a dog is abused in a family? Why do you support rescue animal shelters? What is the purpose behind all of these things? If we are all just cells that have evolved over time and we all eventually will die and return to the earth and to give nutrients to the ground and so that the circle of life will continue or something like that from the Lion King, if that's the case, then why do we care about marginalized people? Why do we care if a homeless person goes hungry? Why do we care if a child starves or if someone's molested or raped? Why does that touch us at our very core?
You see what I mean about the long, unbroken sentences? How many questions did he just cram into that 60 seconds worth of speech? Jeezum crow, take a breath, Eddie. Frankly, the answer to these questions seem to have already been addressed in the previous questions about morality and emotions. We've already gone over why an atheist cares about being moral and why an atheist loves others. Seems like you just can't extrapolate from those answers why we care about helping the homeless, or why we care about a dog being abused, or why we care about marginalized people or starving children or victims of molestation or rape. But let me put a different spin on it. You say, why do we atheists care about all these things if we're all just evolved cells and we're all just going to die and go into the ground? Well, we atheists care about all of these people in bad situations precisely because we're all going to die, and that's all there is to it. We believe that this is the only life any of us will ever have, and because we care about others, because we have empathy for others, and because we have a secular morality, we want everyone's lives to be as fulfilling and positive as possible, because it's all any of us are ever going to get. Now, let me ask you, Eddie, as a Christian, why do you care about these things? Why do you care if a child goes hungry? If the child dies of starvation, then that's all the sooner that they get to go to heaven and be with the Lord. If someone is abused or neglected by those in their life, then that's a teachable moment to show them how this world is full of people who will hurt and disappoint them, so better to put their love and faith in God. Here's a brain scratcher. Why are Christians so against abortion? You believe that the fetus is a human soul at the moment of conception, and you believe that the innocence of the baby grants them a one-way ticket to heaven. And that is the ultimate goal, right? Getting to heaven. So why are you not glad every time there's an abortion? Because that's one more human guaranteed to be going to heaven. If your mindset is that if there is no afterlife, then nothing matters at all, then what you're saying is that the afterlife is, in fact, the only thing that matters at all. And all this life is just a proving ground to amass cosmic brownie points to earn your way into heaven. So why do you care if people die in hurricanes, floods, fires, or tornadoes? Why do you care if children develop cancer and pass away before their 10th birthday? Why do you care if bad things happen to good people so long as you can use that trauma as a cudgel to get them to sink deeper into the faith? It's all meaningless compared to the eternal hereafter, right? We atheists care about this life, plain and simply because it's all we've got. So we better make it good not only for ourselves, but for each other. And why for each other? Because we care about each other. Even though it may just be because oxytocin is being released by our hypothalamus, we care. We care because it is in us to care. Why do you care? Because your holy book tells you to? Is that all there is to it? Is that as deep as your affection for your fellow man goes?
Ultimately, if we're the atheists, we should believe in Charles Darwin's theory and that the survival of the fittest, right? The stronger eat the weak.
Survival of the fittest is not the strong eat the weak. Fittest is not synonymous with strongest. I mean, we humans are at the top of the food chain. Are we the strongest? We eat beef quite regularly. Get in a pen with a bull and see which one of you is stronger. You like pork? Go razzle a boar and see which one of you walk away. Like to eat chicken? Piss off an angry rooster and see where that gets you. Fittest is about being the most suited for survival. Let me ask you this. Which one of these two is more fit for survival? The answer may surprise you. It's the baby, by a long shot. Why? Because the baby is going to be taken care of by literally everyone. Put that baby in the middle of the street with an out-of-control car speeding towards it, and every pedestrian will throw themselves in front of that car to save the baby. That tough guy, on the other hand, same situation. People will watch the car hit him, and many won't say a word or lift a finger to help. But hey, they're at least the same species, so maybe that's a bad analogy. Maybe it's just their age that is the difference between them. So let's look at a different pairing that might explain it easier. Okay, these guys are about both adults. Now, which of these is more fit for survival? Yes, absolutely, it is the hamster. Why? Same reason as the baby. The hamster is going to be taken care of. It will live a comfortable life, being protected and provided for. The crocodile is going to live in a harsh world of danger, possibly dying by being killed by other animals, possibly dying of some disease, possibly a natural disaster, etc. Survival of the fittest is about who survives best in their environment. It's not about who is the strongest. You can be weak as shit, but living in the lap of luxury in a safe and secure environment and have the ability to pass on your genes through procreation time and time again. Meanwhile, the toughest SOB in the world might live in a harsh environment and die before they reach adulthood and don't pass their genes on at all. Learn how natural selection works before you go trying to talk about survival of the fittest.
You know, sometimes atheists or agnostics, they're just really angry at the idea of God or God himself. They see the pain, they see the suffering, they see the evil in the world, and they just don't know what to make of it. And they think God can't exist in a world that these evil things exist in. And I totally understand that. But on the other side of the perspective, you've got people that are just militant, that just really hate God, that they don't love God, that they don't like anything to do with God. They hate religion in any capacity.
The problem of evil is a valid criticism of the Christian worldview. But as to the idea that atheists are just angry at God...
I start thinking, and it makes me so angry.
No, atheists are not angry at God. Atheists don't believe in God. We can't get angry at something we don't believe is real. I'm no more angry at God than I am at the witches who cast the evil spells that give people cancer. I mean, aren't you angry at those witches too for casting spells and causing people's cancer? No? Because you don't believe they're real, huh? Well, that's a very good reason to not be angry at something. Now, there are certainly anti-theist and anti-religion proponents, but that has nothing to do with anger at God and everything to do with seeing the real harm that many religious beliefs have done to people and wanting that to stop. People see how religion tears families apart, ruins relationships, causes people to abandon medical treatment in an attempt to just pray the sickness away. Religious dogma, religious persecution of people of differing faith or no faith at all, holy wars, gay conversion therapy, violent jihads, cults that grow out of mainstream religion, general science denial and abandonment of intellectual pursuits as ungodly, and whatever deep-seated religious psychosis that keeps Joel Osteen flush with diamond-encrusted pinky rings. It gets to a point where you think, wouldn't it be better if people just didn't do all of that? And since it's all in service to a fictional character in the first place, just get rid of it all and everyone would be so much better off. It's not anger at God, it's anger at a whole heaping load of BS being done in the name of a God that we don't believe exists. So that's the whole spiel from Eddie Williams and his 4 questions for Christians to ask atheists to try to trap them into uncertainty and manipulate them into buying into the Christian religion. I hope that if you ever find yourself confronted with one of these types of Christians who don't actually care what you think and are just trying to pull a gotcha, you won't let them get away with their bad faith pushing. And that's going to do it for today. So thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like the video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Until next time, I'm Professor Plink reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.